So Dana, I'm going to start with you. Tell us what you've been doing with Go 61 and the Abolition. Since you said she went to our first Liberty Conference 3 years ago, and what have you been doing since then? What is like walking out Abolition for you look like?
Well, I've kind of been doing when Casey calls me and says, "What are you doing?" That's, yeah. What I've been doing, I've been working with some victims, victim mentoring, supporting them with companionship, transportation, as Casey said earlier, accompanying on medical appointments and some of those kinds of things. I've been working with the motel outreach group. We go on motel outreaches, and I do some of that also. I've also done some education team things, rather impromptu. Thank you, Casey. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And just trying to fill in some of the gaps when needed. So it's been it is a journey. It's a continuing thing. And as I told Casey one time, well, and I said this to a group that I spoke with, I said, once you've seen it, you cannot unsee it. And once you know, you can't unknow. So, yeah, that's kind of what I do.
And Dana is retired, so in some ways you're in a unique position. What would you like to say to other retired people who are entering retirement age or maybe have been for a while? What is this life like compared to options of, because you have a full life outside, you're very active with your family. What is this life like as a retired person?
Well, I made the decision. I don't think I could sit home and watch the Today Show every day. That's just not a fulfilling thing for me. And I would encourage anyone that's in retirement age or looking to that in the near future, I would encourage you to get involved because it's going to have eternal benefits as some of the other things that we do. And there's nothing wrong with watching the Today Show, playing golf, going to the beach and collecting seashells. But those things are not going to have eternal value. We're not going to be able to speak into people's lives in those ways. So I would really encourage people that are going to have the time, and there's definitely a need for people that have the time and the life experiences to work in the abolition movement. It does take time, and I think of something that my pastor said some time ago, because there are a lot of interruptions in your life when you sign on to do this. It doesn't always come at a convenient time, but I remember that he said, interruptions are God's appointments. So sometimes when you're in the middle of fixing supper, whatever else you were doing with your day, and you get a call either that we need someone to come to do an intake with a victim, or we have a new victim and we need to meet that person, or whatever it is, that's an interruption, and you have to consider it an appointment from God.
Thank you. Jenny, you and I were talking the other day, and I forget how the question was worded, but the one thing that matters most, like in this moment, that you would like to share regarding victims or people in need, how would you like to share that from your experiences and how you've seen that make a difference?
Well, so I actually founded a nonprofit in Northwest Arkansas called Hub of Hope. And our tagline is, we want to bring healing and opportunities, that's the H, the O, healing and opportunities to victims of human trafficking and prevention and education to the community. And so we work in all of those different realms. And I was sharing a story with Casey the other day, and I hope this is one that really just will speak to each of you as you're thinking, what am I going to do with this information that I have learned? So I actually got a phone call from someone who had been made aware of human trafficking and what the face of that looks like within our community of Northwest Arkansas through an event like this. It was a speaking engagement. And so she called me and she just said, Jenny, I just saw a woman lying in a ditch, and it's in a very prominent area of the Rogers-Bentonville area. And she said, I don't really know what to do, but I thought I'm going to call you and let you speak into that. So I shared with her some things that she could do, but I said, let me call some of our team members and see if they're close nearby and they could respond to that. And so, long story short, team members did arrive there. After 2 hours, this woman shared her story. She actually had been trafficked from another state into our area, and her pimp, her trafficker, had pretty much just left her, and she had a little bit of learning disabilities as well. She was helpless. She was in a helpless situation, and so we got her a safe place to stay that night, and were able to put her in contact with her mother, who she had been out of contact with, and the next day she was on a bus back home to the other state, and she was reunited with her mother. And so I tell you that in saying that you take action from the things that you learned. And so that individual who sat in a seat like where you're sitting today heard this. She was able to recognize something was wrong. Red flags went up. And so she responded. And because of that response, a girl is back home with her mother in a safe place. And so it's important to realize that we, just like what Lindsay said, we don't just soak it up or read it and saturate in it. We have to have action after that. And so that's really the message I would love for everyone to understand, is that it's not in our own capabilities, it's only through Him, but action is necessary.
That's amazing. It kind of, as our society, and it increases to instill in us a message of when we see something like that, that's not my problem. To think that there is a mentally disabled woman lying in a ditch, and that is something that occurs, but it does in Arkansas. I mean, that area is probably not too high risk of an area, so we'll have opportunities where we see things like that happening, and I pray that less and less often that we would walk away from the mindset of, that's not my problem, and look at it as, what would God have me do in this situation? So, Miss Tish, after coming to the First Liberty Conference, you really surprised me. I felt like you took, you raised the bar for all of us, like in a really, really big way. I know that when I was living in Springfield, that I would have to drive 20 minutes across town to get to the training class. And there were some days that I would think, gosh, it's Saturday morning, you know, I don't want to get in my car and drive across town. And I would think, but Tish is driving here 3.5 hours. So what made you, for 9 weeks, drive almost a 7-hour round trip to go through a 2-hour volunteer training class? What made you step up to that type of commitment?
Kind of like Dana said, once you know it, you can't unknow it. And I think I've stated this recently, that I think this is what my whole life has been leading up to. I can look back and see different opportunities and different people that God has brought in and out of my life, and I just felt very compelled to take the next step. To this day, I don't have this grand picture of what my role in Go 61 is. I just take each step as it's presented, and the first step was obviously to go through the training. I talked to my husband, and he said, sure. I said, okay, this is every other Saturday. It'll be all day, I mean, as far with the driving, and he was very supportive, and so I just took that as, okay. And so I committed to it. Thankfully that year there was no weather, nothing that, and it was just a drawing, this is the step to take. And so I just have taken those steps as they come.
And so starting, being brand new and starting an abolition chapter in an area where there's little to no abolition, and this topic is new to that area. What has that been like for you to set out really alone, one person, I'm going to take this to my area and let this light shine? What has that been like so far?
Actually, it's been a lot less disappointing than it probably would have been 5 years prior in my life. Going through the training, it's very hard for me to explain my training experience. Those of you that have been through the training, I'm sure it's very similar each time, with some tweaks here and there. But with each session, I would have my drive home. So I didn't just go right back into life as soon as the meeting was over. I didn't go home to kids or an activity. I had a 3-hour drive home. And I think those drives home were probably as much of the molding and the shaping and the change that was occurring within me as the training. Of course, I took what I got from each training session and just was able to chew on it all the way home. And so I learned in those trainings that I have to be patient. This isn't a go in, knock down doors, rescue somebody, and then they're all good and life is happily ever after. I learned that. So the journey has not been nearly as frustrating as I thought it would be. We have 2 that have been very committed to our first training sessions. Very eye-opening for them. I feel a commitment from them. My pastor at my home church has been very, very supportive. Really encourages the church to be involved. And I think that will continue. I've had some good response, not a lot of action yet, but I feel like that's the next step, is getting out more into the community and letting them know more about what Go 61 is, the services we have to offer as far as prevention, and so it's been exciting and peaceful. I'll just I think God's been.
Thank you. And Miss Beth, almost every week, you and Kristen and I gather and pray. And one of the things that God has been really convicting me of for the past, really significantly, the past 2 years, is to press towards an increase of prayer. I'm just going to say this. I feel like a lot of times, like the talk and conversation of prayer seems like a boring one. Let's go do something. It's not exciting. It is, but we don't perceive it often as exciting or too beneficial. We want to do something, and so prayer gets undermined and overlooked and underestimated. So we have tried to press into that, and I'm so excited looking into 2018 how we can increase that. But from our times of meeting and prayer and spending time in the Word together, what do you see that's come from that? What has that been like for you? And what do you see that stemmed from that?
I'd say on a personal level, too, with that, is with us being volunteers and all, and it's just us 3, but when we're there on Wednesdays or whether we're just in a group setting somewhere just meeting, that prayer time together and those friendships are very important. It's one way that we can help encourage each other, but also we're keeping God at the forefront, because that's our main focus. But it's been also very encouraging. You mentioned it earlier about us praying and seeing fruit from that with the law enforcement. But we also saw that because we've been praying for increase in victims self-reporting, and we have seen that too. So it's very encouraging, and it's just, I think it's just important for us to keep it at the forefront. And I think we've been very blessed with being obedient in that area.
Okay, thank you. And I have one more question for you for just right now. Beth answers a lot of our emails that come in, and when, was it 2 years ago? She had gone through a condensed training, and then she went back and she did like a fundraiser. She had raised some funds with her women's group at church, and she had contacted me and said, our women's group raised some funds for Go 61, and I have no idea what else to do. I'm a mom, and I've got boys, and I don't know what to do, and I don't think I can do anything right now, but here's some money. And so shortly after that, I couldn't answer. We were getting so many emails, and I couldn't answer them all myself, and coordinate and train volunteers, and it was being spread really thin. So I called her and I'm like, hey, can I train you to answer emails? And she said, okay. So it began a year of that. Then the end of last year, it's like, you know what, let's meet together and, every week and press in. But what are some of the emails been like that's come in for requests for help or that you've seen? Or victims emailing in? What are one or two that might stand out, or even community members reporting?
The one that comes to mind that stands out wasn't from a victim herself, but it was from her family. They had reached out to us, and it was just, in a way, it was just frustrating because they had a lot of information that they could give us, and they didn't know what to do, and they were reaching out to us. But in the circumstance, and I can't remember it completely, but we were limited in what we were able to do with them as well. And I think it was a situation that she was not a minor anymore. So, it depended on her choices. But it is difficult when, we do have those emails come in and we can't give them the answers and full hope that they're searching for. But we can try to, direct them the best way that we can and give them hope as best as we can. I'm trying to think of one from a victim specifically. Okay, this was probably the most recent in the last couple of months, was the girl that was in Nixa that had emailed us, and she had come from Texas, and she was homeless, and she corresponded with us for a couple of times, but I don't know that we ever got with her. We lost contact with her, and that was, that's kind of hard as well. So I don't know, I can't answer that question very well, thinking about victims that have reached out to us and that we've been able to help directly.
The girl in Nixa was hiding in the shed because she didn't feel safe. And would go to a place where there's the internet, where she got a hotspot on her phone and send an email and start going back to my shed. And those communications continued for a long time. The one that, I'm not sure if it's the same family, because we've had several families email us, but there was a family that a foster daughter had turned, it was either 18 or 19, so still a teen, still an adolescent, but not at the age where you can send somebody to go get her and bring her back. And sharing this with law enforcement, we had heard, well, it sounds like she doesn't want to help herself. And so sometimes we're met with frustration in those senses because it's a lack of being informed of many people. So lack of what the plight is, of lack of trauma-informed care and sensitivity. And so it shows us that there's work to be done. Two victims that's emailed us that stood out to me. One in the past year emailed and said that she had just left a domestic violence shelter because she didn't feel safe there. And could we help her find a place to go? And the reason she didn't feel safe at a domestic violence shelter is because pimps would stand across the street with drugs, with heroin in her hands. And when the women would walk out of the shelter, and pimps and traffickers know that some of your most vulnerable populations is women in domestic violence shelters. If they had a safe, supportive network and family to fall back on, they would be there with them instead of a shelter. A shelter is nearly always the last resort. And she said, and it's not safe there because they're waiting for us to come out. And so just thinking, realizing the lack of appropriate, safe, secure places for them to go, sometimes that's really a challenge, and help, working to help meet those needs. So, and another lady had emailed and said that I'm 48. My mom started telling me when I was 8. I've never done anything but prostitution, and it's been 4 decades, and yes. Do you think it's too late for me? And so, that heaviness, like on that mountain, I don't know, last night Benji made me think we need to be sensitive to the spiritual movements in motion. And when Lindsay's thing, when it wouldn't work, especially when she wanted to show the undercover thing, I was just thinking, there is an enemy that is trying hard to keep this injustice from having a light shine on it. He is at work actively. And so thank you for your guys' for answering. And then Jenny, I want to come back to you really quick. What would you say from your experiences is the single biggest challenge in abolition? Whether it's a professional challenge, personal challenge, organizational challenge.
Single, that's hard, a single one. I would say one of the challenges that I have personally, and with the work that we do there in Northwest Arkansas, is to actually have people understand that we're not making this up. Like, this is not something we've designed, we've thought of because it sounds like a movie script, but like it's happening. And so when we open our mouths up and we get opportunities to speak in a public venue and we speak about it, there is opposition all the time because they don't believe it. So I pray immensely before we even go in that the Lord would just open hearts and open minds to see truth. I actually have received an email from a prominent individual in my area who said, "Little girl, shut your mouth. We want to attract tourists, and what you are saying is not true. It does not happen here, and you are spreading lies, and it is detracting from tourism in our area." And what he doesn't know about this little girl is it just makes me open my mouth bigger and louder. And so, but I would say that's probably one of the hardest things, is just making people understand this really is happening. We're not making this up. It's really happening. So people want to know statistics. They want to know, what does it look like from a statistic point of view? We don't have that. We don't have that. That's why Casey has been so instrumental in speaking that into the work we're doing, is to have something that measures that. And so we're working hard to be able to have some type of measuring tool to give a face to it so that there is credibility there. So that's probably one of, there are many, but if you want me to say one, that's probably one of the biggest. Yeah.
Very good. I remember when she got that email.
My ears are red right now, actually, as I said that. It's like, it's a Madonna.
When she got that email, she called me and she said, "Do you want to know what this person just said to me?" Because he owned property in an area where that's close to where they're trying to, he's like, "No, we're not going to be known for that." And speaking of not wanting to be known for that, there's 160,000 people in Springfield alone, and 40,000 professed Christians. And how many answered the call to justice? So I pray, the Bible says that a cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. And there is a cord of more than 3 strands here today. So I pray that, it's like what Lindsay said, when you say this is happening, and they're like, okay, but how about the game? It literally is what we hear so often. And so I'm just praying that as you hear that people, like what we've heard from Lindsay, and people walking out, and it's not easy. And when Lindsay was talking about the wind that wants to blow you off the mountain, I just wanted to give that like a big hearty amen, because there have been some winds, some serious winds at time too. So Dana, not only do we get winds where we feel like we're going to get knocked off the mountain, but I know that when you've worked with girls, when we've received them, that they feel like they're going to get knocked off the mountain as they try to take those steps of restoration. What are some challenges that you've seen in a girl or two that you've worked with? 3 minutes.
It's kind of like Jenny said, there are so many. Don't know which one to capitalize on. Something that we hear sometimes from some of the victims that we encounter is, why are you caring about me? And I think that they're thinking there's something in it for us, that we're doing that for some special reason for ourselves. And it's hard to convince them that, no, we do care about you. We care that you're being victimized this way, and we care that you're being mistreated, and this is not right, and we want to help you. And that helping process is a long process, and it's very difficult for them frequently to really understand that each time we meet with them and we check off a checklist, so to speak, which we don't really have that, but say we meet with them and we help them to get some papers that they don't have, identification, or we help them get something else, that it's a stepping stone to that end goal for them to be in the process of restoration. And frequently, they don't get that. So it's a time thing. They want what they think they want, and they need it now, and it doesn't work that way. So I don't even remember Casey's question, but the frustration is that we can't get them to really understand that this is a process, and you have to hang in there with us, because we're going to be with you, and we'll help you with all this stuff that you need to do, but you've got to want to do this. So it's hard to, because that's all they've ever known, many of them. That is their normal, and it's hard to teach them and show them that this is not normal. This is not what God made you for. And there are better things. There's going to be a better life for you. It may not be the happily ever after like we see in the storybooks, but it's going to be so much better than what you have. And it's a step at a time. And you got to hang with us to do that. That's the frustrating thing that I've seen. Not because I want to say, oh, we cured this many people. We get that question a lot. So how many people have you rescued? Which translated means, how many people have you gotten back to be happily ever after? That doesn't happen. We consider success in things like they didn't shoot drugs that day, they didn't go back to their pimp, they made efforts to get their GED, or whatever the situation is. We consider those to be steps of progress, and those come very slowly. But we keep working on it.
That's very good. We went on a motel outreach with some a youth group from Ozark, and well, not even a motel outreach. We did like a city tour, and we were taking about 20 youth, teenagers to different areas in the city and saying, this girl was sold here. This is what happened to her. This is what her pimp did to her. And this is where, where she's at now. Over here at this motel, we responded really early in the morning when the police called us and said, you got to come and get these two girls because they're, a pimp that beat them up is going to bond out of jail in an hour, and you've got to find a place to take them, and you have an hour. And said, this is what happened here, and we take them to another place and say, this is where a 14-year-old was chained to a toilet, and she was sold, and would talk about that because we found out that the faith-based community, and so we're trying to change this by reaching our youth. The faith-based community rarely investigates the needs and what's going on in the community. And so therefore they can't address the needs because they don't go and proactively investigate what are the needs of this culture of where I live. And so we're trying to show the youth, the teens, hey, this is the culture of what's going on and where you live. Like, this is outside your immediate world, but really close to it. And as we were doing that, one of the teenagers, or teenage boys, prayed over our group. So he was 17, praying over our volunteers, and he said, Lord, don't let them become depressed, that it's so hard to rescue these girls. Don't let them become downtrodden and despair, and don't let them give up hope, that it's so hard to pull somebody out and for them to stay out because the darkness wants to drag them back through addiction and thoughts of wanting to die and being trauma bond and all the things that go along with PTSD. And as he was praying, I thought it was so sensitive and so insightful. But in my heart, seeing how hard it is to restore people who have been impacted by being commodified just does not cause me despair. It makes me want to dig in. Like, come what may, this one will not blow me off this mountain. I will be on this rock for good, on this rock that I stand. Because when we see the damage that it does and the lives that it takes, sometimes so much damage that it cannot be undone, but for a supernatural move of God. And what a great reason for the Church of God to be like sleeper agents who are activated, who are mobilized. Justice is not the message of the church. Jesus is the message of the church and the cross. But justice is definitely an arm of the church, and it is a message of Jesus. And to ignore justice is to ignore half of Jesus. So I'm praying that we're going to do one last quick question, and then we're going to pray, and you'll be sent to lunch. But I'm praying that we let God, all of us, me, everybody in here, that we let God be bigger in our lives, and that we become more in tune and more insightful and more able to discern the movements of God. I loved what Benji spoke about last night, because we talked so much about what the enemy is doing. That God is like, hello, do you not see? Do you not care? Do you not announce it? Do you not lift your hands for it? Do you not celebrate what I'm doing? Just pay attention. But we get so focused on our immediate that we don't investigate what is God doing. So for each of you, what message would you give to somebody new to abolition? Like, I've just heard about this year. I've heard about it like it's over the globe and it's here. Now what? What do I do? Because really quick, if you drove more than an hour away, would you stand up? If you drove more, okay, and then it's sit down unless, wait, you're jumping the gun, Jenny. She does, she wasn't lying, or, no, I'm just, if you've drove, stay standing if you've driven more than 3 hours away. Wow. Stay standing if you've driven more than 4 hours away. It's you. And you're at, how far was your drive, Kathy? 5 hours to come to this. Thank you. So for people like everybody that stood, that says, I'm going to go that far, and everybody else that's here, that we're a handful in this community of who responded. What would you say to them? What now? What's your message for them? That's for somebody that's just getting started. I'll start. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll start with the answer to that question, because as I was kind of preparing my heart for this, God led me to Galatians, and not going to be able to tell you the chapter or the verse because I'm not good at that, but it's in Galatians where Paul is telling the church that we've all been set free, but we're not to use that freedom to fulfill, this is going to be my paraphrase of this, to fulfill our own desires and our own wants, but that the law can be summed up in one thing, and that is to love your neighbor as yourself. So if you are willing to serve one another in love, and you're willing to see all of humanity, and I cannot wait to hear tonight, this afternoon's Adam speak, because God really led me to the Good Samaritan. So I know God's just really working. But anyway, I'll start preaching here in a second. But if you're willing to see all of humanity as your neighbor and do something about that, you've got a place in Go 61 and in the abolitionist movement.
Or in IJM.
Yeah, as in the whole,
yeah, absolutely. There is a place for you. What's good at stuff?
I'm going to follow that up. I don't know. It just, along those same lines, I just encourage you to, and I think you will with everything that you've heard and learned this weekend, you're going to see differently. Your thoughts change, your vision changes. You see people differently, and you fully see every single human as a human. And you'll see these people around, and you will remember that's someone's daughter, that's someone's son. And just remember that they are human and they are loved by the one. And I encourage you to try to love them too.
I had a quote a couple of days ago that I read that said, if you knew everybody's story, you'd love everybody. What would you say to somebody just starting their journey, Dana?
I think that if you feel convicted in any way about what you've heard this weekend, I think you need to take action. It's going to be your responsibility to do that, because I think that God will prompt you. Now, what your place will be, I don't know. It's not everybody that wants to work with victims. Not everybody wants to go knock on motel doors, but there is so much more to be done than the frontline stuff. There's a lot of behind the scenes, so to speak, things to be done. And that's not even talking about, I mean, then there's always giving financially, there's always prayer. But I would encourage you to follow that prompting. Check it out. Check out Go 61, if that's, check out the abolition movement. Don't just jump into it, but you need to follow that prompting because it is a work in progress and you are not going to work with the victim and cure them. It's going to take lots of perseverance and lots of prayer and lots of patience, but it does need to be done because God loves them just as much as any of the rest of us. And it's our responsibility to show them that God cares about them and that there is more for them than what they've been forced to do.
Thank you.
And I would say, I'm watching it. I'm going to talk fast.
Louise got 7 o'clock.
I would encourage you all. I believe in missional living. I believe that if you say I'm a child of God, then everything that we do, we're on mission for Christ. Everything. The people I pass at the grocery store, the people that I sit with as my child is playing soccer, like we are on mission in everything that we do. And so we can't think of our lives as, here's my life as a family and a friend and a husband and a spouse and a mother, and then I go do mission work. It's in all, it is just flowing through our veins and everything. And so may that be your driving force. There's vulnerability around you everywhere. If you serve in a food pantry, if you give out clothing with a clothing giveaway, if you work in a crisis pregnancy center, you're working in vulnerability. If you are with middle school and high school children, you are seeing vulnerability. So just allow the Lord to work through you, and the way you will be prepared is to dive in the Word. Don't negate the power of the Word. And so you wake up every morning and you seek the Lord's face. He will give you discernment in how to act that out and what your action is going to look like.